So good morning everyone, or good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And thank you for joining us for today's Le Cordon Bleu Master of Gastronomic Tourism webinar. And today we're talking to the lovely Sam Gowing, chef, clinical nutritionist and business mentor from foodhealthwealth. And no doubt Sam will tell us a bit about her work as we go through the webinar today. But more importantly for today, Sam is a recent graduate of the Le Cordon Bleu Master of Gastronomic Tourism program. So congratulations, Sam. That is a fabulous, fabulous achievement.
Thank you, Sophie. It was a great journey and a very tasty one, I might
add. And also, I must say, Sam has a special place in my heart because she was also our very first applicant for the program back in 2012. And Sam has shared this journey with us over the past 3 or 4 years, and we are so grateful to have her here with us today to share some of her insights. So thank you very much for joining us, Sam.
Oh, it was a great opportunity and extraordinary how it all came about.
Yes, well, I'll ask you to sort of perhaps give us a bit of background on that. If anyone else has any questions, if you just type them through on the left-hand side. My colleague Kath Phillips from the office is here with me, and we're more than happy. If you don't mind answering questions too, Sam, as we go along.
Oh, please.
So basically, perhaps just talk to us a bit about when you realised you wanted to work in the food atmosphere, in the food sphere.
Sure. So when I began my culinary career when I was about 6 years old, my grandmother taught me to cook, my father, and I was so interested in the art of cooking, hot chocolate moments. Really
now, Sam, there's just a bit of an echo in your microphone.
Yes.
We're having a little bit of difficulty hearing what you're saying. I caught the word grandma and pavlova.
That's not a bad start. Okay,
that's perfect. If you stay there.
All right. So my culinary journey, my love of food really began as a child from about the age of 6. My grandmother taught me to cook, and so did my dad. And I remember my first creation was a hot pink pavlova, and I was mortified that it would take more than half an hour to cook, because when you're 6 years old, you need instant gratification. So from there, I kind of self-taught from the Margaret Fulton Yellow Cookbook, if you know that. And during my school days, I was really disappointed that there was no other option to go into the hospitality industry other than to do an apprenticeship as a chef. And as a young girl or a teenage girl in the late 70s or early 80s, really, I didn't want to be in that male-dominated environment and earn that moderate or meagre, I should say, apprentice chef's wage. So I had to wait until you came on board with a master's degree to get that formal qualification.
Oh, well, we were thrilled that you found us. So what do you think, tell us a bit more about your career advancement, because, you're quite an entrepreneur really, and you've really taken your career in different, different directions, haven't you?
Sure, yes, I have. When I finished school, I went into the family business, which is a restaurant business in Melbourne, and it was the mid-80s, and we were really going through an extraordinary boom in gastronomy in the 80s. Fine dining was, how's that sound,
Sophie? It's gone a bit more echoey again.
Okay, I'm just going to stay there. I'm going to find a solution. See if this will help us. I'll put my really ugly headset. We usually don't have them. Let's see if that's better.
Let's have a listen.
There we go. Okay.
Oh, that's much better.
That should be a lot better. Okay, my apologies. It's usually fine without this. Okay, so in the middle of the 80s, I was working in my family business, my father's restaurant, and a lot of what we we were going through was the rise of the gastronomic boom in the mid-80s in Australia. And at the end of the 80s, we had, of course, the recession we had to have, and it changed the way the industry had to happen. So
No, sorry, now you've gone mute. Now you've muted. Apologies, Sam.
That's all right.
Yeah, no, that's okay. So, yeah, mid-80s.
So the mid-80s, we had the gastronomic boom of Australian cuisine, and then from there, we had, the recession we had to have, and the market changed. We went from fine dining into kind of modern brasserie cuisine, where Caesar salads became very prolific on restaurant plates, and burgers even appeared in what was once fine dining restaurants were now opening up to a more relaxed style of cuisine. So in the 90s, I was 24 when I took on the mantle of the licensee of the Grace Darling Hotel in Melbourne, in Collingwood. And at the end of the 90s, I sold up with my brother, whom I ran the hotel with. And I retrained as a clinical nutritionist because I wanted to find a cure for cancer using food as medicine.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I'm still looking.
4 feet then.
Yeah, that's right.
So, and then from there you've moved into the wellness, and you've worked at the Cabarita Retreat, and you've spoken at lots of conferences. So, what are some of the tools that you think got you to where you are today?
Look, I think I've always had entrepreneurial bones, which I inherited from my late father. And I was in the right place at the right time to study clinical nutrition, and that really was able to help me merge my culinary expertise with wellness, and that having that undergraduate in nutrition certainly really helped me. However, I really wanted to solidify the work that I had done, and so it's been a real pioneerical component. Can you still hear me?
Yes, I'm still here, but I'm just turning it off because it might be causing the echo. If I have my phone on when you're talking, that might cause the echo.
Yes, perhaps that might be it. Okay. So, the rise of the wellpreneur, as I call us, is, to be able to see that clean eating, as we now call it, and, the future of food is really full circle, isn't it? It's from paddock to plate, from farm to fork, all the things that we talk about, particularly in the high end of the culinary arts, especially in Australia, this whole return to food and this awareness about minimal processing. And I've just seen that has really helped me sort of propel the work that I do on a greater level.
So moving on to the gastronomic tourism, when you were looking at the program, what was it that stood out about the program that made you choose to study this, and how did that fit in with your journey?
At the time in 2012, there was literally a piece of paper. Somehow there was a flyer that came through the Northern Rivers, which is a collective area up here in Byron Bay, through a training area, and my colleague had found this piece of paper that said, whether it was a PDF, I'm not sure, or a physical piece of paper, there's a master's coming up, and he said, this is so up your alley, which to quote him, and I pretty much jumped on it. I, at the time, was working full-time as a head chef and clinical nutritionist at Cabarita Ocean Health Retreat, which is sadly no longer open, but was about 40 minutes north of my home in Byron Bay. And I was also running the current business that I have, Food Health Wealth, so I literally had no spare time. And I just, based on my intuition, I've always wanted to do a postgraduate, and it just to have the honour of studying with Le Cordon Bleu, I have to say, it was always a dream. I didn't think I would manifest it without having to cook too much. So I was even more thrilled that I could apply my understanding of academia and my new learning, obviously, to the course, as opposed to physically cooking in that kind of more culinary-oriented component. So I was delighted that it was more theory than practical.
Oh, that's a really interesting slant, something I hadn't really considered about the program. But yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. So what do you think will be the most use to you from what you have learnt at Le Cordon Bleu?
From the outset, it really is the understanding of the academic methods, and certainly in some of the units that was always, the great challenge. But ultimately, it's the enrichment of my already quite vast knowledge of gastronomy and gastronomic history, and being able to really go deeper into the understanding of where does our great love of food and our heritage around the world come from, and to be able to explore a lot of the regional, the really older cultures. Tradition is something that I'm always working with in the writings that I do, and to really permeate a lot of those, that historical component has provided such a tremendous backbone of authority and credibility into the work that I do, coupled with the wellness tourism that my business has grown into insofar as writing menus for luxuries and hotels and spas around the world, which I've been doing for 8 years. Being able to underpin that now with an understanding of academia and, of course, the gastronomic tourism component has just been able to make my business shine, and I've noticed I have a lot more respect within the global marketplace of where I work.
Oh, that's interesting to hear. Going back to what you were saying before about, the theory aspect of the program, how did you find studying online, and what were the sort of pros and cons of that online study environment?
In my undergraduate in nutrition, I chose to do a lot of the final subjects online. I was able to do that. So online study requires a great deal of discipline. I actually love it because I can do it at my own pace, obviously within the sessions or the trimesters. So I find that of great benefit. My only the con is that there's always something to do, that even on the weekends or days off, I'd always be thinking, oh my goodness, I haven't done that, or I've got to think about this, or what will the outline for that document be, or that project, and whatever. But, that's the case of going on campus as well. You still have that component. But to be able to download the modules and the units and all that information as the units rolled out each trimester, I just found it so wonderful, and I know that I'll have that resource certainly for the rest of my life to be able to access for some of the, certainly the homework that I did. So I thrive on online learning. I just don't like the late night lectures. I usually fall asleep. I'm an early bird, that's why.
So tell me, how did you actually study? Did you do 1 unit per session or 2 units? How did you fit that in with your life? Did you allocate
in the beginning?
time?
Yeah, for sure. In the beginning, I chose to do 1 unit per session, and that was really doable. Then I managed to take 2 on board, and I noticed that my grades were not, I didn't excel when I took 2 because I was still working full time, in my business as a full-time operation. And I probably chose subjects when I did do 2 at the same time that weren't as correlated or interfaced, so they were quite different. And I think if I had selected 2 at the same time that were a little bit more associated, I would have flowed a little bit more with peace and ease. But certainly some of the subjects I embraced a lot more than others, but that's the nature of the beast, isn't it, with any kind of study. So I found that I thrived doing 1 at a time because I had the time to do it, but toward the end I wanted to actually finish, and I had the time to apply myself to 2 units as well.
So talking about that, what were your highlights? Do you have, as you reflect today on your journey, perhaps if you can tell us a few of the highlights along your route?
Sure. Certainly the creative writing process really amplified my work. I had already before I embarked on the Master of Gastronomic Tourism journey, I had already self-published a book, so I am a published author. And if I had have known what I know now, and so far as writing and the creative process, my book would be very, very different. So two of the standout essays I wrote most recently in that writing, food and writing, I think the subject is, please correct me afterwards, was a profile I did on food critic Rita Ehrlich, and I was thrilled to be able to have the opportunity to write that, to critique the critique in a way. And also I wrote a beautiful piece about a local restaurant here, and my work, I would like to diversify even more, or perhaps go toward that whole restaurant reviewing, of which I have participated as a judge for the Food and Wine Association of New South Wales in the past. But that creative writing process and assessment of restaurant reviewing is something that I just found so fulfilling, and I wouldn't have been able to do that so articulately if it had not been for the studies. And of course, as I say, the gastronomic history, and really inquiring deeper as to how do we come into professional restaurants over the last few hundred years.
Sam, we have a question from Mary. Welcome, Mary. Mary would like to ask your opinion about if people have got a writing background but don't have much of a cooking background, do you think that this program, they would still be able to be successful in this program?
Absolutely, Mary, and hi there. Absolutely, because it's not necessarily a nuts and bolts cooking program by any means. It did benefit me that I have a history in the food industry and the restaurant business. However, your writing skill and that creative skill and being able to formulate documents and so forth and understand the process of academia is certainly an absolute bonus. Obviously, you need to have a passion about food and wine to go into this process. But I would say that culinary technique and awareness of kitchen systems is not necessarily required, and I think it's something that you will embrace and learn and perhaps understand more about the food science, of which I have a biochemistry background as a nutritionist. So the food science elements really help to solidify my understandings within the kitchen. I must add, I'm not a formally qualified chef. I'd self-trained and was asked to become a chef over the years. My background before wellness was as an award-winning restaurateur in Melbourne. I co-wrote the menus with chefs, and I've always loved food. But it wasn't until recently, the last 4 or 5 years, that I worked clinically and practically as a head chef. So, I found that not having that practical background certainly didn't inhibit any of the growth or the understanding. I hope that helps.
Terrific. And we have another question from a lady in Canada that is unable to be with us today, but she was sort of wanting to know, who do you think would enjoy benefit from this program? Obviously someone with your background, but, perhaps who else do you think would be suited to this program?
I think anyone with a driving passion for food and the history of food and understanding how tourism, is so burgeoning that we often say in the practices that I work with and when I speak on stage, I often say, we used to go to that tourist destination for the view, and now we tend to go for the food and the view is a bonus, or we go for the view as long as the food's good. So food and tourism, gastronomic tourism, is becoming such a beacon and such a pinnacle that anyone that is interested in travel and great food, and it doesn't have to be high-end, gastronomic cuisine like the work that I practice in, it can just be that passionate interest and that devotion for finding the best miso in southern Japan, if that's your thing.
Yes, it's funny that you mentioned Japan. One of our current students, Josie Withers, has just done a magazine all about Japan and Tokyo and the gastronomic tourism of Tokyo. What do you think distinguishes gastronomic tourism from normal tourism, Sam?
I think there's there's that real desire to be well fed. We've particularly from an Australian perspective, and I know we've got a global audience, but just let me narrow it down for a moment. I think, Australians are so enthusiastic about great food, and I know so is the rest of the world, that if they can have a holiday and eat well, they're doing a lot better than just having toasted ham, cheese sandwiches and room service. And we see that's very, very evident, particularly in the Balinese tourist market or the travel market that goes back and forth to Bali. In the old days, the clientele, and that doesn't necessarily the global clientele, not just Australian, would go to Bali and perhaps just eat hotel food. These days, the state of the restaurants in Bali is absolutely second to none. The local dining is exceptionally safe. The regional cuisine is absolutely magnificent. And I think that attracts so many tourists as well, that it's not just about the travel, it's not just about the surf or the beach, it's about what can I eat while I'm there, and that's what underpins gastronomic tourism and is making it such a huge part of that tourist sector. From a wellness industry perspective, we talk about LOHAS, so lifestyles of health and sustainability, and that is approximately an 8 to 10% slice of the global market of industry. So gastronomic tourism really fits in there. It's lifestyle. It's not necessarily always health-oriented. But then I talk a lot about food and happiness. So if you can go to a destination that you eat well, that you relax and you come home happy, that to me ticks all the boxes. And I see that on a global level on a regular basis.
When you think about it, sometimes you almost need a holiday from your holiday if you eat that stodgy. Sometimes
Absolutely.
food is a bit off, but when the food is nourishing and fulfill, you can come home. It can really enhance the way that the true relaxation of your holiday experience, can't it?
Absolutely. I see that there's a real push towards this whole wellness and happiness component. It's not necessarily just going to that destination for that great massage, that great spa experience. That, of course, has a component. It's about being well fed, and there are so many visitors to different destinations who will say, oh my goodness, I ate and drank so much and I came home and I barely put on a pound. Of course there are other people who come home and need to shift those 5 kilos if they've really gone overboard, but they feel nourished. And in my work, it's about nourishment as the pathway to happiness, whether that's just from food and wine and travel, of course, our relationships, workplace well-being and so forth. So really looking at how can we nourish ourselves, and it doesn't have to be a 7-course degustation. It can be a simply beautiful steamed bowl of rice and a local pickle or something like that can really help to fulfill the spirit and the soul on that level.
Thank you, Sam. So moving back to the program, what do you think is your favourite unit?
What was my favourite unit? Is that what you asked?
Yeah, absolutely. What was your favourite unit in the program?
So certainly food and wine writing was definitely a favourite unit. Certainly the subjects, the units that Roger taught me, of which I can't remember because they were in the beginning. Gastronomic tourism, of course, was a great unit for me, and I love food and drink in contemporary society. I think that was the first unit I undertook, and so I was lucky because I felt that I was able to ease myself into this formal process, and so I felt quite immersed in that subject as well. The other units that I undertook were more about the event planning and management, of which I found obviously a lot drier and not as flavoursome because they didn't always talk about food, but anything to do with the food, the culture, the history, the gastronomic tourism, of course, really ignited my passion.
So Roger teaches aesthetics of food and wine.
Yes, aesthetics of food and wine. I loved it. Loved it.
And I think in the early days he used to teach gastronomy and communication, but Mika Witzel teaches that one now. So, and also you've just finished with your industry research project. Did you want to just talk a little bit?
I have, and I'll be very honest. The industry research project for me was really challenging. it's threw up a whole lot of issues around my own work and what I actually want to do and about clear direction. And I say it was challenging because it really pushed my buttons and it made me become very, very clear about the messages that I've been conveying. So I've been a pioneer in the wellness industry for a long time now, for over 15 years, and I've been able to do that with a biased approach. And what the research project taught me was to take an unbiased opinion. And I have to say that I am so grateful for those hard yards that I had to put in, because I had to break down a whole lot of paradigms and a whole lot of parameters that really weren't serving me on a personal and professional level. So my work, I actually changed the topic. I tried to structure the wellness industry within my research project at the beginning, and I realised that was a huge feat. So I actually did a bit of a detour, and my studies were on who makes a superfood super. And so I had an in-depth level of inquiry about who drives, these superfood trends, of which I've been driving myself for about 10 to 12 years. And being able to interview key stakeholders within the marketplace was a great opportunity, and something that I will certainly be able to work from. The body of work that I submitted, which was actually my last unit that I finalised in October, has now given rise to a whole huge body of inquiry, and so in 2016 I'm going to be able to harness that and really develop the research that I undertook from that as well. So it was a huge challenge. That's just the way I am. I'm a creative writer and not a data analyst, but it really opened up a whole new plethora, and as a result I've been invited to participate into a PhD program further down the track. Not just yet, I'm having a bit of a rest.
And a well-deserved rest too, Sam. Do you have any workshops coming up? I saw on your e-newsletter that you did a workshop, I think, in Melbourne about the what makes food super. Have you got any more of those workshops coming up perhaps in 2016?
I'll be rolling that out, hopefully nationally, from February in 2016. At the moment, across summer, I'm open for business. If anyone wants to Skype, I do a lot of mentoring programs, one-on-one mentoring. I really help people find their purpose and passion, and then also do private cooking workshops here in Byron Bay across the summer where there's so many tourists. And then once the new year kicks in, then I go back out on the road, both overseas and nationally, with a cooking school, hosting master classes, but also trying to share a lot of the research that I undertook in the last 2 or 3 years of doing the gastronomic tourism masters as well.
And Sam, do you think you would be where you are today without the masters?
No, not at all. It's given me such a huge depth of understanding and such clarity about where I want to go and the work that I've already undertaken. It's really helped to solidify my own place within the global marketplace, but also within the culinary arts as well. It's really given me a real vertical drop, as we call it in marketing, a real vertical slice of that pie, which means that, my niche is now even deeper. I often say in mentoring, your niche should be an inch wide but a mile deep. So as a result of doing the masters, I feel like my niche is so niched, and my unique selling points and all of the marketing jargon, I guess, that I work with is completely underpinned and totally validated having completed the masters.
And Sam, how did you find, what was your experience dealing with the other students and teachers in the Master of Gastronomic Tourism program?
Oh, it was great fun. Certainly, the online Blackboard Collaborate and so forth, you have virtual friends there, of course, and I found the tuition and the after kind of tuition, you know, the ongoing email and so forth, everyone was always there, you know, if I needed support or if I was confused about how to roll out or the direction to take for a particular essay or project or assignment, then my supervisor or lecturer at the time was always available. Within a 24-hour period, of course, they would come back to me. And I think to have such dedicated guidance and to be able to learn almost one-on-one in that sense, of course it's in cyberspace, but to have that support and the support from the other students who also might say, hey, I don't really understand this process, can you explain this? It just meant that you've got this, you know, this classic old classroom environment, but of course we're all online.
Are you there, Sam?
Yes.
Yeah.
Did you hear that?
Yeah, I heard that, but then you froze.
Oh.
That lovely smile of yours. Sam, we've got a few people here today who are not yet in the program. So what would be some advice that you have for new students that are thinking of joining the program?
Absolutely. You know, I would say go for it, because if it's fear you back that you might not be good enough, and that's certainly often the case with a new body of work of any kind or an undertaking, then just surrender to those fears, you know, really go for it, you know, pursue that passion. The course is so diverse, there is so much for everybody. I'm, you know, probably the first person that will say not everything resonated with me instantly, of course, but that's part of the learning process. So, you know, if you really want to fulfill your desire to do postgraduate, especially if you're truly passionate about working in, you know, the history and the new way of tourism and understanding food from a different perspective, then please take that plunge. It's the tastiest journey you can have, I can assure you, and I really wouldn't be here today, particularly at the end of 2015, if it wasn't for the studies that I've undertaken in the last 3 years. They really have changed my life, and I'm so grateful to Le Cordon Bleu for that.
And we are so grateful to you as well, Sam, that you had faith in us in those early days. As we came together, you know, Le Cordon Bleu and Southern Cross University, and we partnered together, Southern Cross with their tourism background and knowledge, and us with our, you know, the culinary arts background. So we really, you know, I really take my hat off to you that you saw how that would assist your journey, and you took that leap of faith yourself and joined us. Mary's just asked if you've got any plans to come to Canada in the next, you know, few years.
Mary, I've just been. Mary, I was there working in Bancroft in June. What a pity we didn't meet then. There's a retreat there that I was working on for a couple of weeks just to help them transition a little bit. So I'm not sure when I'm coming back.
Talking about that, Sam, what do you see will be the new trends in gastronomic tourism and perhaps wellness tourism? What do you see as the next wave, perhaps?
Sure. So from a wellness tourism perspective, having just returned from speaking at the Global Wellness Summit, and proud to say that I was on stage after Deepak Chopra, we looked at, you know, obviously the Medi-Spa, which I know is not a food-related component yet, but, you know, eventually it will be if I've got anything to do with it. So the spa destinations who are using a lot more cosmetic medical techniques, at the moment they're not really embracing the nutrition component of good skin coming from the inside as I would sell that. So Medi-Spa and the future of nutrition around that is a huge component of what's driving wellness tourism. Stem cell research, I know that sounds a little scary and a little medical, and I have this crazy gag that when you go and have a Radel glass without the stem, they sold the stem for stem cell research. But that's, a huge part of where wellness tourism is going. We're looking at all this medical research and how it's creating more and more destinations for people to go and heal and have those treatments as well. Where there's wellness tourism, where there's healing, gastronomy has to follow. The nutrition component takes a little while, which you might find unusual as I do, because for me, food and healing are absolutely the two paramount components. But that comes from me as a nutritionist, as a chef. If I have Western doctors sitting here, they will say, no, it's all about, medical research and integrative medicine. So that's really where we're going. What I spoke about at the Global Wellness Summit was this, return to clean eating, but more importantly about sustainable and mindful approach when it comes to buying these alleged superfoods. Are we importing too much chia? Are we having too many goji berries? Why can't we be having locally grown strawberries? And as for kale, I say we've hit peak kale. And, in my research, particularly for the last unit that I undertook, I revealed that watercress is actually a much more powerful green than kale. It rates the top of the scale of 100 powerhouse foods. So be really mindful about that. What are the food trends, and are we aggravating those food trends, or are we actually making them more accessible?
That's fabulous, Sam, and I loved your stem cell. That's a true food coming through there, isn't it? The real glass. I look at the short glasses I've got now, I'll think of you.
You do, darling. Yeah, I don't like them. I like to be able to hold a stem, so,
I think
that's how I am.
Wine gets too hot.
It does. And I find I drink it too fast because it's in a tumbler.
Well, it's interesting you also mentioned watercress, because my mother-in-law used to go down to there used to be watercress growing along the river, and she just used to gather it up she just couldn't get enough of it when she was pregnant with my husband, so maybe that got him,
really?
Gave him a good start in life. I'd like
Absolutely.
Any of our other participants have any questions? We have Crystal here from Colorado. We have Lynn Warren here. Lynn, I think you're in Queensland, and obviously Mary's in Canada. If any of you have got any questions, please turn your microphones on or type your questions in on the side. We'd love to hear from everybody. And while you're thinking of your questions, Sam, we'll probably wrap up shortly, but do you have any other tidbits of wisdom that you'd like to share with the other participants and everyone else who will listen to this recording? Just some things that they might need to keep in mind for their study in terms of the way you study, or keeping up with your study, or accessing the information online. If you've got some tips in that area.
Certainly. So I suggest, really look at the course outline. If you want to follow the course, of course, as it unfolds, of course, that's the way to do it. I tend to be a bit rebellious and kind of pick and choose what I can do and what's of interest, if that's, of course, online. So maybe don't do as I do as I say. But more importantly, listen to your gut about the studies. Don't take too much on. Perhaps 1 to 2 units is plenty for you. If you're available and you can do 3 or 4, absolutely go for it. But most importantly, relax and enjoy it. I think that's the biggest thing. At times I was like, oh my goodness, I haven't done this and I haven't got this assignment ready. And I was like, just relax. This was a voluntary approach. No one's forced me to undertake this study. So as soon as I started to back off a little bit and really enjoy it and be able to access my terrific library of books that I have, luckily collected over the years, that really helped me as well. So perhaps plan your year or your sessions, very wisely, and don't be unrealistic about how much energy you can put into it. If you're not a night person, as I'm not, insofar as study, I start work very early, from the computer, that is, and so if you're not a night person, then you need to consider how you're going to cope with some of the evening sessions. If you're a morning person, there's morning lectures. Absolutely, jump on that and incorporate that into your working day, as I did.
Thank you. So in terms of hours per week, we suggest, from Le Cordon Bleu, we would suggest that per unit you spend 10 to 15 hours per unit per week, and particularly early on as you're familiarising yourself with online learning. What was your experience, Sam?
Absolutely. I would say I would have devoted approximately 8 to 11 hours per week, just depending on the weight of the unit and how much I needed to absorb. For some of the units, I had a little bit of background knowledge, so that was a welcome bonus, I have to say. But insofar as setting aside study time, particularly when assignments are due, and don't underestimate the time that it takes to reference your assignments. It's one thing to write and research, but to reference is a whole other journey, I found anyway, and I became a lot better at it, of course, as the years unfolded. So, I always allocate, if you've got an assignment due pending that week perhaps, or that fortnight, then I would usually allocate an extra hour plus just for the referencing, and I would slowly start to collate the different references. I know that's part of the academic process, but if you're new to academia, then really give yourself an extra 2 hours a week just to really digest it and so forth. And there's also additional reading, and of course if you're focusing on the culinary component, there's additional eating, and I sort of factored that in as well as a little bit of recipe testing when I was doing one of the units as well.
That does sound delicious. I remember another student telling me she hosted a wine tasting, and I thought that sounded quite delectable too, looking at the different demographics. So in terms of, the deadlines, you're a working woman, you're full-time, you're travelling to Mexico, Canada, all around Australia, you're often in Melbourne. Did you find that the course deadlines were rigid, or did the unit assessors have some flexibility and were you able to work collaboratively to work out a solution if you were perhaps overseas at the time of an assessment?
In hindsight, Sophie, I feel really lucky now that you mentioned that, because it just all seemed to fit. But my life's a little bit like that. Things do kind of fit and make their way. If I was in the middle of the session, then I wouldn't take on travel. So I would usually take on projects, obviously bookended on trimester break and so forth. If I had to go somewhere and I knew an assignment was due, and I had that knowledge previously, then I would write to my lecturer or supervisor and say, hey, I've got an event, part of that is documented for what I do, so could I have an extension and so forth. And most of the time that was granted. There are other times, of course, where it was less flexible, and I totally understood that. And I think you've just got to work within your parameters. And as I say, don't take on too much, and know that you've got approximately 13 weeks in order to learn, to listen, and to write and reference, of course, and just try and make things fit. Of course, being online, some of my lectures I was on a retreat in Bali tuning in. So, there's ways and means of doing it. So just make it happen. That's
great advice, Sam. In terms of your assessments, were there any group assessments involved throughout the duration of the program?
Because of the nature of my business, Sophie, I didn't participate in any group projects because I couldn't always guarantee I would be there for that other person when they were available. But there was a lot of opportunity to do group assessments together, and I would highly recommend that if I was in the one place at the right time. But more for my work, I actually did most of in fact, everything I think pretty much independently as well.
So there was that flexibility to be able to, pick and choose in that respect.
Yes, absolutely. Yes,
Mary has another question, which is how do you manage scheduling the course with everyone in different time zones? I know with Roger, he would send out a survey asking everyone the most suitable times, and then he would choose 2 different times to record the live collaborate sessions, but they are recorded and left in each unit site. Do you have any experience with that? I mean, how did that work for you if you were in Bali or in Queensland or in Melbourne, in the different time zones?
Sure. So I felt obligated, and that's just me, to try and tune into the live sessions. But as I realised that wasn't always going to be the case, particularly with the last research project, because I was travelling, I was in New York at one stage and so forth, I just took the pressure off myself and was able to tune into the recordings. And to be honest, the recordings, of course, are just as valuable. You don't have to be there. You can listen at your own accord. I would find that I could just do that on my mobile phone with headphones and walk up to the Byron Bay Lighthouse, as an example. Obviously, I wasn't looking at the pictures, but I could get the audio, and then I would come back and look at the visual recording as I needed to. The beauty of the recordings, of course, is you can always go back to it. So when I was really struggling understanding, data analysis for the research project, I just kept going back to one lecture all the time and tried to understand that from the PowerPoint, as well, of course, as my other learnings and the other information provided. So the beauty of it, unlike being on campus at a traditional, conventional university component, is that you can go back in time and you can listen to lecture 1 and the introductory lecture, or you can listen mid-session and look at, whatever you were learning at that time. And, of course, the structure and the way it's rolled out, of course, sequential and just helps you along the way as well. So don't worry about the time zones. If I can do it from all over the world, from Zimbabwe or Zanzibar, wherever I was at one stage, to Bali, to New York City and back to Byron Bay, then anyone can do it, as long as you've got good Wi-Fi.
Yes, that's very true. We even write that in our brochure now. You need good quality internet connection. Well, I think that's all we've got for today. I know Crystal has been typing, and Crystal's just written, Mary has asked all of my questions. Thank you, Mary. I'm so happy that we've gotten to hear from you. So Crystal's been really happy, and I'm sure Mary has too, to listen. And thank you, Lynn, as well, for joining us, Lynn Warren. And Sam, thank you. I could actually say, quite frankly, but I know that you've got a really busy day and you're catching up with, you've got
Sonia
today. Sonia, yes, beautiful Sonia,
yes.
I met at the Mount Lofty, which is now running as a spa retreat. So, Sam, just to recap, can you perhaps give us your website? And I know you send out an e-newsletter. If people want to hear more about what you're doing and perhaps connect with you, and I'm sure if you were travelling perhaps to Denver or something, Crystal would love to meet you, or if you do get back to Canada, Mary would love to. How can they contact you, Sam?
Sure. So my website is foodhealthwealth.com. foodhealthwealth.com, and if you go there, you'll find there's a free 20-minute Skype session, and if you ever wanted to discuss the course or your food or life in general or your career, then there's that free mentoring session, which of course we'll organise for the time zone where you are. You'll also find you can sign up for the newsletter there. The newsletter's called The Crop, and that newsletter, as an e-newsletter, believe it or not, has been going since about 2002. So you can sign up for The Crop, or you can just email me directly, sam@foodhealthwealth.com. I'm on Twitter at Samantha Gowing. My Instagram is Chef Sam Gowing, and my Facebook page is Food Health Wealth. So there's plenty of ways to find me. Otherwise, just send a carrier pigeon, and hopefully you'll find me, Soph.
It's funny you mentioned carrier pigeon, because just to get a letter in the post these days is quite special. A handwritten note. We do everything, you know, Facebook, Twitter. It's funny you mentioned so many handles. Well, have a fabulous day up there in beautiful Byron Bay, Sam. And hopefully we'll catch up with you next time I'm up in those parts.
I'm not sure if you can see the screen, can you?
It's lovely and sunny. Oh, you've got your pussycat there.
He's just arrived to.
This is Max.
Yes, he's my brand ambassador. He's just arrived. You're a bit late, Max. We're finished.
You have a fabulous afternoon, and it sounds like you have a well-deserved rest in 2016. And I look forward to keeping in touch with all the amazing things you do. And I, you know, coming from a gastronomical background, I do think it's really important, all the stuff that you're doing in terms of getting the tourism industry to see the value of what you actually put in your mouth, because, I mean, you know, what we put in our mouth is crucial to the way we look on the outside, isn't it? So thank you very much for all that you're doing.
Beauty and health starts within the digestion.
And you're a great example of that. Look at your lovely, beautiful, glowing face there on the screen.
Thank you so much for having me.
Have
a wonderful Christmas, and I look forward to finding you all on social media or in my inbox soon.
Terrific. I wish everyone a very Merry Christmas. I hope you have a lovely, wonderful time with all your families. Bye for now. Thank you very much.